Hello everyone, I finally got around to editing down this video and I would love to show you how Canvas, I created it, how I painted it, what techniques, loosely using that term, I used, and basically just the full process. I'm happy to help, happy to share and tell you guys whatever you want to know. And I hope you enjoy this process. If I need to slow down anything or be more in depth about anything, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment because I'm happy to share everything that I know with you guys. So let's get into it. So first step is to put a very pigmented kind of V or like a wide V of color, and that's going to be the base of the petal. And then I took a clean brush and drug out the color. Well, it's clean with water on it. Drug out the color so that it could blend out. And I also added peaches and yellows to kind of give some tonal differences in each one of the petals. And I did the same process for each petal going all the way around. It's probably super helpful if you have a photo reference of either the actual flower you're trying to paint or of a piece that you've seen that you're trying to just hone your own craft on without copying it, but still an inspiration piece. That always helps me. And I also add a lot of water to the edges of like the top edge of these petals because these are going to kind of be background petals, and then we're going to add more deeper tone petals in the foreground. But we have to let all the water evaporate before doing that so that we can layer the translucent colors and not pick up and transfer everything. And so my artwork in general is very loose, and so this one's going to be no different. I'm adding a whole bunch of water to blur out the lines, and now I'm adding kind of a dark purple at the center base of each of these petals to create more depth. You could use a gray, a darker pink, or I guess you could even use a black, but maybe not yet because you still have to put another petal in front. And so I'm also adding some little baby florals, I guess kind of buds of flowers, and that's also done in the same way. I'm putting solid pigment at the base of the flower and then clean water to pull the color out. The only issue is if you look to the flower bud that's on the top of the screen, you can kind of see the pink that's soaked in before I got to it. So move fast. Don't do all the petals at one time when it's the first flower you're putting down. I hope that makes sense. It may not. Let me know if it doesn't down in the comments. So for the second round of petals, I'm using brighter colors, more pigmented colors to create the petals, and I'm overlapping them kind of a little bit on, I guess, the seam between the first sets of petals. Oh my goodness. Maybe that doesn't even make sense. I hope it does. But you can still see the break between each of the first round of petals through this second set of petals, and that's okay because it just is more texture on each of the petals and it just looks more realistic in my opinion. And so on these second sets of petals, we're doing brighter colors and we're overlapping slightly and blending out just the same. And this process goes on for each one of the flowers. So I guess I'm going to repeat what I'm saying so that there's not just dead airspace. And maybe on my repetitious explanations of this, it'll make more sense, or I'll find a better way to explain what I'm doing. Because honestly, as an artist, I see something I like and then I decide, I'm going to give that a shot. And usually I don't nail it the first time, and then eventually I get it, and then I have no idea how to backtrack and tell you how I've done it, other than reliving the thought process through the video as I'm editing it. So some of this is going to be super time-lapsed and some of it's going to be slow so that you can really see the moves of the paintbrush. These are also squirrel hair paintbrushes, I believe. They're not synthetic, so they hold on to the water really, really nicely. So, in untime-lapse time, I let this flower that I'm working on right now dry for, it was probably an hour. You just want to make sure that your paper is no longer shiny or satin before you start your next layer. That way you get those nice translucent layers and you don't have any like color transfer really. I mean, you still have some, but everything I'm using is the same colors, just different depths in the hue. So I'm just going over it. You don't want to add too much water, and every watercolor video I watched said the same. You don't want too much water when you do this, and never really told me what too much water is. And essentially what I do is I will clean out my brush, scrape it on the edge of my water cup a couple times, make sure there's nothing dripping off, and then I'll stamp my brush, just the base of it, on a paper towel or something, and just to get more of that extra water out, because if you don't, you're going to end up kind of getting kind of a pilling look on your paper, kind of like when you have a sweater and you get those little balls of fabric that just collect. It looks kind of like that if you oversaturate your paper, so try not to do that. A little bit of shiny is good. Too much shiny is bad. I also used a number of different kinds of watercolors, from in the pan versus in tubes. And I find that the pan ones are more opaque somehow. I don't know, but just keep that in mind. Also, the shape of your petals, keep it very loose. I am really bad about idealizing petal shapes. Sorry, that's my Ring doorbell. I'm really bad about idealizing petal shape. It's something I've always struggled with, is not really painting what I see, but painting what I think I see in my own way. It's very frustrating. So once you get your second round of petals done, I'm adding more purple, but in a deeper tone. So I've added a little bit of like a Payne's gray or even a black to just deepen the center of my petals. And even on these buds that I have, I'm putting that darker purple or slightly hued black purple just at the base, because I felt like I wanted to. And every color I'm adding water to it to kind of blur out and create these little pockets of splash and color. And that's just a personal preference of mine. There's probably an easier way to get these splashes to look like this, but this is just my way. I just kind of force it instead of leaving the paint to be just diluted and moving it on its own and creating its own little splashes of color. It's the control person in me, I guess. I don't know. So I also will add puddles of water or watered down pinks or peaches. And then I will add kind of a harder line like I'm doing here. Just make sure if you do that you take the time to blend it out a little bit. So now let's do another one. So I waited a little bit too long on this one, or I used one of the pan pinks and it stained instead of blending out as much as I wanted it to, which is fine because we can cover it, but just be advised, if you let it soak in too much, then you have to kind of mask that hard line instead of just letting it blur out and looking however it's going to look. Oh my goodness, I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm not sounding like a full crazy person. So each flower you want to let the colors bleed out just like the purple just did. And if you run into an area that has too harsh of lines, just dab a little bit of water and then some opaque watercolors and let that just bleed and blend out, and you'll get really awesome color shifts. And it's something that I'm learning with watercolors, is to be kind of loose about my applications and not so obsessive about how each petal goes. And I guess it's kind of an art therapy for me in this moment. I think it's something that artists maybe go through every time they try a new medium. I don't know how relatable or not this is, but every time I try a new medium, it's as if I'd never picked up a paintbrush before. It's a whole new animal every time, and it's kind of exciting and frustrating for me every time I do it. Anyways, enough about the personal stuff. I am going through and adding the petals just like before. Some of my flowers have 5 petals, some of them have 3 petals, some of them have 12 petals, because it's not an actual real flower. It's just something that I was inspired from other artists and also stuff straight out of my brain. And I hope that's okay. It's okay with me. It almost looks like I'm getting pilling in that puddle on the middle bottom of the page, but it ended up being just fine. If you find that you're getting that, just dab it up. You can always dab up the water. I usually do that with a paintbrush so I can blend out things instead of just pulling color up, but that's also probably a personal preference. And now I'm going to add stems. I wasn't sure if I was going to do stems because it kind of is a harsh line amongst all this kind of cloudy, floaty imagery that I put down with these flowers. And so I drew them out as thin as possible, and then I'm going to splash through them and make them bleed out just like everything else. So it's kind of, it fits more with the painting as a whole. And also with this, I worked and reworked something that should be easily just abstract. I'm sure you guys could do this in a much simpler fashion than I did. I was telling Jeff when I was editing down this video that it's probably a much quicker and simpler way to do the piece that I just did, but I don't know how to do it yet, and I'm just learning it. So if you guys have tips to make something abstract less structured, because I think that's what took me so long, let me know. I'm always happy to learn something new, and you guys are the best teachers. I learned so much from you guys. So even with the green puddles, I'm putting a little bit of color at the edge of my water puddle and just blending it out. I'm using a paintbrush that has a fine point on it, and it has the color as well as water. And then I'm also using a larger, kind of rounder brush to add my puddles of water and blend those out. I don't clean out that brush every time either, so the brush that is on screen right now is the brush I'm talking about. So I let it have whatever color it has in it. The only thing I do is pick up more water. And I think that's important when you are trying to create what I'm trying to create, is to not be so clean with your brushes. Oh my goodness, I hope that makes sense too. I'm using everything from a very deep blackish green all the way up to a vibrant lime neon green, because I think even though lime may not be a color found in stems, I like adding the vibrancy of many, many colors. Also, when doing these stems, I will add puddles of water like this and then draw my stem through it. That way it just has kind of a variable amount of bleed out or fade, wash out. I don't know the proper terms. I'm learning, you guys. So this is my first fully realized watercolor piece, and I'm still not sure it's complete for some reason. I feel like there needs to be something else, but I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think. So I'm working on this piece all across different parts of it. While I'm waiting on one section to dry, I'll add water and work on another section. Sometimes I'll add water and just see if it'll kind of blur out on its own or if I need to help it. Sometimes you have to use kind of a smudger brush and force these puddles, or maybe not. Maybe there's some medium that I don't know about yet that I should be using. But in the meantime, what I'm doing is forcing these puddles and bleed outs, and it's almost not galactic, not ethereal, maybe ethereal. It's like space clouds. Oh my goodness. I'm sure I sound completely not in my sane mind, but I hope it's relatable to at least one person of what I'm saying, and it'll be super worth it if the rest of people watching think I'm not using the proper terms. It's okay. And so even on the petals that should have been completed by now, I'll go back and add some darker colors or some more vibrant colors. But this flower specifically, it just didn't have the center florals like the other ones. It just had the lighter ones that we started with. So I had to go in and add, after starting with the green colors. For some reason, I forgot completely about the center of this flower, but it's okay. Turned out to be one of my favorite ones. And so just like with the other flowers, I'm pulling some of the color out into puddles. And now I'm adding even darker centers to these flowers. It's more of the blacks with just a little bit of purple. And so after that dries, I decided I wanted to create some cascading looks and give kind of that viney type of feel, even though it may make absolutely no sense with these whatever type of flowers they are. It's kind of just the image I saw after seeing how soft the background was. I wanted something else, something more definitive, something that has more motion, because these flowers are kind of just pointed in all sorts of directions. So this is a consistent direction for the piece. It's very, it's linear. It's up and down. So for me, sometimes it grounds the piece if you have something like this in it. I don't know if that's because just gravity is so relatable. I don't know if it's just a visual that's constant for a lot of people, whereas the flowers just floating around wouldn't be. I don't know. I don't know what my thought process is with that, but I'm really glad I did it, and now I want to do more cascading florals anyways. So I'm adding what initially I thought I was going to have a mid-tone green stem, and then I would add the darker greens up by the base of the flower, and then the lighter greens where like the light would hit if the stem was bent. And then I realized that is not a soft flower if I'm being so specific. So then I kind of just went rogue and put all the colors everywhere. And I think it turned out okay, because ultimately by the end of it, the cascading, dripping green ended up being kind of one of my favorite parts of the piece. But what do you guys think? Also, I ran into many times the greens, when I made them drip, they would go over the petals of other flowers, and that's perfectly fine. Just use your kind of sop up brush. The big one that I'm using is what my sop up brush is. It's just water. And that pulled all the color, the green, out of any of one of my other flowers. And that gave it kind of like perspective, because if you have a drip that goes and all the way down past the flower and then you pull the color up from the flower, then it looks like the drip is going behind it effortlessly, essentially. And I accidentally did those kind of leafy looking drippy areas, and so I decided to add more of those. Some of them turned out like I liked them to, and some of them did not. And the ones that did not turned into just puddles of green color because I can. So next I tried to deepen some of the centers of the flowers with some straight up black watercolor. I almost called it alcohol ink. It's very not alcohol ink. And then I kind of decided I wanted to create just a couple shadows, so I watered that down a lot, and then I added some shading lines, so it's essentially a watered down gray that allowed me to kind of separate some of the petals by adding shades. I decided to add, I don't know, some of the lines worked, some of them didn't, so I watered them out if I didn't like them. And you can also put a shadow between some of the folds in your petals if you want to. If left to my own devices, I would have gone through and made these abstract flowers into something more realistic. But I caught myself before I went too far. Also realizing I want to paint a realistic flower instead of these soft, fluffy, not abstract, but kind of flowers. So it's something I may do in the near future. Working with other mediums just is something I really like to do. Learning new mediums is something I've always liked to do. Whether I'm good at it or not is irrelevant. I think keeping yourself in a box in terms of what mediums you use can be detrimental to your growth as an artist. A lot of times I'll use baking techniques in my resin work. It's just I pull inspiration and techniques from all the mediums to create my own looks in other mediums. I hope that makes sense, because maybe it doesn't. And so after looking at it, I decided I wanted to add some colored pencil lines and shading. You can't really see it from this far back, but I'm going to give you guys a close-up soon. Canvas came in to say hello. You can see when I give you the up-close looks how I added some of my kind of squiggles and sketch lines throughout the piece. It's just kind of something that I do. I don't know. I'm not even sure why I like splatters of paint and lines of color, the sketchy lines. I'm not sure why, but I love it, and I hope you guys do too. Ultimately, if I put a little bit more time into the colored pencil part of this, I think it would have softened some of the blends between the different colors that I used, and I didn't really want that. I wanted to still see some of the paint strokes, so I didn't go too crazy with any of the shading and any of the colored pencils that I'm adding on. I really wanted to see through the colored pencils to see the different paint strokes. My hair is so greasy, I'm just now noticing, so apologies that you guys have to see that. So you can also use colored pencils to add the darker lines if you didn't do that with your just watercolor. I'm using everything from a bright purple to peaches, yellows, corals, reds, hot pinks, and all sorts of shades of green. And I'm using the purple pencil if I want to add any shading with the pencil. I think using a black would be too harsh, and I wasn't sure how I would have shaded it out, so the darkest color that I had for the florals was a bright purple. And I'm mainly using this, honestly, to add splashes of color that wasn't so prominent when I was doing the watercolor portion. Effectively, it's the yellow that I kind of lost, and so I wanted to add back in some warmer yellow bits, and so that's what I'm doing. I also want to know what you guys like about these time lapses. I've had so much going on lately that I've had to do time lapse videos. Do you prefer those, or do you prefer the live videos? I really want to know. And so since some of the greens were harsher and some of them were softer, I'm using the green color pencils to either soften or darken the lines that I did with the watercolor. I'm also adding more squiggles because I love them. This is a black Posca pen. I'm adding just a couple of dark squiggles in the center of my flowers. And seeing it on camera, I wish I had a little bit more purple coming out from the center so it doesn't look just like a dark splotch in the center of the flowers. But live and learn. And so here I'm adding the black Posca and then blurring it out with water, because Poscas are water-based. You can, if you wanted to, add green Posca and then blur it out with water. But anyways, here's the super up close final piece. You can see the pencil lines, you can see the paintbrush strokes, you can see all the dripping lines and the puddles of water that kind of dispersed and diluted the color. I really like this piece, and I hope you guys do too. I hope this my explanation was clearish, and if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer. So just leave me a note in the comments. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Be kind to one another, because you never know what someone's going through, and always remember that we do the test so you don't have to. And we'll see you guys on Monday for the next live. Bye.